And that's why we don't let Chuck do the intro anymore. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Keystroke Medium. I am Josh Hayes. It's season 4,
more
episode
cowbell.
17. We need more cowbell for this one. I am here with Scott Moon and Chuck Manley. I'm our co-hosts for tonight's show. And our guests this evening are Kacey Ezell, David Weber, and Christopher Smith. Welcome, Chris and David and Kacey. We are in for a really fun episode tonight. We're going to talk about Kacey's brand new anthology that she helped put together, Noir Fatale.
Noir Fatale.
That's exactly how I pronounce it.
Yes, exactly. I noticed.
So close.
Yeah. So welcome, David and Chris and Kacey to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Hi.
Oh, well, I can never turn you down, Kacey. You come to me with an idea and you say, "Can we do a show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I really want to tell her no." And then I slap myself in the face and say, "No, let's do that."
That's how these guys got signed up for the anthology too.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, there was that little letter that had something with kneecaps and ball peen hammers. I don't remember, exactly.
But she phrased it so nicely.
Yeah,
it's like, I don't want to break your kneecaps with a ball peen hammer.
Right.
Please don't make me break a kneecap.
I just got done writing a short story with Kacey, and let me tell you, it was very nerve-wracking the entire time. Like, I'll send her an idea, and I don't get a response back, and then I see the little dots on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, God, she hates it. She hates it. She hates it.
No, it's a 5,000-word essay of what she did with your idea and ran with it.
And it was good.
You're trying to catch up.
What I get was it was good, but if you could just change the whole thing and write it this way, way better.
I did not do that. No, that is not at all how it happened.
If you could just turn the Hobbit into a Nazgul,
right.
The point of view would be nailed.
Right.
Lies and damned lies, all right up front.
So before we get into the show proper, I wanted to welcome all the guests that are in the live chat tonight. Hey guys, it looks like we've got a couple of new people in the live chat. Welcome. And also I wanted to say I got a preliminary total on the Covers for a Cure donation pot that we have running right now. The donations will run through tomorrow afternoon if you'd like to donate, but right now we're sitting at just under $5,000 for the Covers for a Cure donation. We took in almost $3,600, almost $3,700 on the auction and the donations pre-show, and then we got notified by email that another $1,000 donation was made directly to the 501c that we're working with. So we're counting that in our total. So we got about $4,700 going right now. So that's what we're going to give to Matt and his family this week.
Congratulations! Wow, that's outstanding. Well done, mediums.
I was very excited. So yes, everybody that participated in the auction.
The best part about it was Matt was watching the show, and I'm sure he was watching, like, these writers are out of their minds.
We are kind of a separate breed.
Well, the secret is out. Okay, it's not that we're out of our mind. It's that our minds take in borders.
Indeed.
Okay, and then we have to get them out. It's like building an extension for your mother-in-law. You write a book for the other boys to go live in. I mean, very simple.
Well, we've had Kacey on the show several times. David, this is your third time on the show, which is crazy that you keep agreeing to come back.
That's crazy that you keep letting me come back.
Well, Chris, you haven't been on the show, and so I'll let you go first. Kind of introduce yourself and tell us about how you got invited into this anthology.
Don't worry, Chris. It doesn't hurt. It
doesn't hurt.
I'm better at this. Well, so I think I'm getting over the stage fright. So my name's Christopher Smith. I started writing about 5 years ago, and was fortunate enough to meet up with Kacey at DragonCon, and she decided we were going to be best friends. And then we started working on stories, different stories at the same time, throwing things around. And she and I practically share a brain at times. Like, I'll literally be thinking something on the drive home, and I'll get home and I'll say, hey, you know what I was thinking about today? She goes, wait, I was thinking about this, and it's the exact same thing. So
there's
not creepy at all.
There's a Steve Martin movie in there somewhere.
Yeah, this is even after I changed phones, so I know it's not the phone. She doesn't have me bugged, and I have a new truck, so I know it's not that. But she's just really, really good at reading my mind, or at least thinking along the same lines. And so, over the years, we submitted stories, we kicked them around in different anthologies. Each one that I get into, I try to bring her into, vice versa.
We're a package deal.
We are. Kind of.
People don't know it, but we are.
When I say writing partner, I mean writing partner, not just someone I write with occasionally. Kacey and I are constantly throwing things back and forth and pushing each other to do stuff and bringing each other along, sometimes kicking and screaming in my case, to do things to further our careers and make ourselves more noticeable, I guess, tonight. So yeah, when a while back I had seen something on, I think it was Facebook, about a noir anthology or a hard-boiled detective kind of crime anthology that was coming out, and I said, "You ever get into this kind of thing?" Casey's like, "Yeah, I kind of like it, but I need to do some research." Well, about 2 days later, she comes back. She goes, "I just basically read the entire collected works of Raymond Chandler, and now I want to do this."
Just the first two books.
I'm working on Dashiell Hammett tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. I mean, that's almost exactly how the conversation went. Of course, I'm being a little exaggerating slightly. She only read half of the collected works of Raymond Chandler.
First 2 books. That's it.
First 2 books. Right. And so I immediately sat down and watched The Maltese Falcon, and we started kicking around this idea for her. And she cranks out this story. Now, this isn't an exaggeration. In about 24 hours, I have a full 6,000 word story on my computer. She goes, "Take a look at it. So let me see what you think." Like, oh, okay. I'm expecting a couple paragraphs, maybe an idea. Nah, fully fleshed out, realized story. There you go. Set in 1940s Los Angeles. Okay, great. And she nailed it. She totally nailed the whole noir theme and genre in this story. She was looking for a place to put it. Wasn't able to find one for that, and then of course, being Kacey, said, "Well, I'll just make one." So came up with this idea, and I'll let her tell the rest of the story about it. She said, "Do you think I should do this?" And I said, what can I say to stop you from doing it at this point?" And she goes, "Good point." And Kacey?
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know, do you want me to tell this story now, or do you want to finish introductions first?
No, go for it. We'll roll with it.
All right, so so all of that happened, about 10% of what Chris said. It only has to be 10% true. I know how these things go. I've been in the military for 20 years. But I did write a story, and I really actually really enjoyed the process of writing it. And I had always kind of loved the film noir. Maltese Falcon was always a favorite. LA Confidential was a favorite movie. And then I read Farewell, My Lovely, and I forget what the second one's called, but basically Raymond Chandler's first 2 books, and absolutely fell in love with his writing style and his use of language. And so sat down and wrote a story, a noir story that was set in Washington, D.C. Shortly after World War II, and sent it to Chris and said, "Is this any good?" And Chris was like, "Yeah, this is really good. What do you want to do with it?" And we talked about it. And this was around the time that John Ringo's Black Tide Rising anthology was getting ready to come out, which we both had stories in. And so I had Baen anthologies on the brain, because I really learned a lot, and I really enjoyed the process of being involved with that anthology. And I wanted to do it again, So I remember thinking, God, I really wish that Baen would do a noir anthology. And then I started thinking, well, how can I, what deck can I stack in my favor to try and make this thing work? And sometime around this time, I either had just read or started reading Larry Correia's Grim Noir series. And that too has a very heavy noir slant. I was like, this is what needs to happen. Larry Correia needs to edit an anthology. And then I could submit to it, and then he could love my story because I think it's really good. And then I could be in that anthology. Only, obviously I'm not in charge of what plans Larry Correia has for his career. So I am.
That's odd, because you do for everybody else.
So you kind of
suggestions.
You kind of sideways your way into it, though. You decided that Bridget was going to be your new best friend forever.
That was separate. That had something to do with that had nothing to do with the anthology. That's just because Bridget's amazing.
She is.
Don't cloud the issue, Chris.
I'm sorry.
No, so anyway, fast forward a year or so, and I'm going to LibertyCon, and I find out Larry is going to be one of the guests, and I still have this idea hanging around in the back of my head, and so I reached out to Rich Groller, who's the super hardworking and amazing programming director for LibertyCon, and I reached out to him and said, hey, I have this panel idea, and I think it could be cool, especially since Larry's one of the guests this year, and he has this Grim Noir series. What if we did a series on the intersection of noir themes and science fiction and fantasy? And Rich liked the idea. I volunteered to moderate the panel. I dressed up. Yeah, I dressed up as a femme fatale. Like I had like the skirt suit and the back seam stockings and the whole nine. Right. The only thing I didn't have that I really wanted was one of those birdcage veils. I couldn't get one in time, but it actually worked out great because we did the panel. I moderated it. We had a great time, and then we went just through serendipity. The next event after that was the a dinner that Baen Books puts on for its authors at conventions where a lot of them show up to, and LibertyCon is one of those. So we had the Baen dinner next. So I this is where I sort of socially engineered, like sneaky engineered my way over into a conversation with Larry and hit him with my pitch, which went something like, "Hey Larry, did you have a good time at that panel?" "Yeah, so did I. So I was thinking, how would you like to do a noir themed anthology with me? I'll do all the work. You put your name on it. We'll sell it to all your fans and make a lot of money." And an avowed capitalist like Larry was, he was like, "Well, tell me more."
You had me at money.
Right.
This is Pearl, by the way. She's going to come hang out with us, I guess.
Oh, hey, Pearl.
We have a long history of having cats and dogs and pets on the show.
This is why I'm on the porch.
So we've done a couple anthologies. We're actually right in the middle of putting another one together right now. And so I know personally that there are a lot of work to wrangle and put together and make sure all the authors are on time and make sure the editors are staying on top of stuff. And doing this, you've been in several anthologies from the writer side, but what experiences did you see on the side of production?
So yeah, I think that I got really, really lucky. When I first started, talking about taking this project on and doing this, I was actually warned by a couple of people who know what they're talking about that, hey, this is kind of a big time sink. Like you're gonna have to wrangle all the writers and make sure they get their stuff in, and when they're late, you're the one who's gonna have to email them and crack the whip and all this kind of stuff. And I took their input and said, thank you, I appreciate that. I'll think about ways to mitigate that, but I still really want to do this project. And it wasn't hard. It was really, really easy. And I got so lucky because the list of authors that Larry and I came up with everyone was, first and foremost, everyone was super professional, including Hinckley, Correia, who I believe this is her first solo story. I know she had a story that she did with Larry in the MHI anthology, but this one was her first solo story, I believe, that she's sold. And so she's brand new to the business, but she's incredibly professional. I sent out communications and received timely communications back. I mean, everything was really great. And even when because things take time and life intervenes, and there were a couple of people who were like, hey, I need a little more time. Everybody communicated about it. And so for me, it wasn't even hard. The hardest part was I would get the stories and I would try to sit down and edit them, and I'd start reading them, and I'd get sucked into reading them and not do my job as an editor. And I'd get to the end of the story and be like, well, shit, now I have to start all over again because I haven't been editing this. I've just been reading it. So yeah, I suspect that, based on the anecdotal evidence that other people have given me and from what I've seen, with other projects. I suspect that my experience is not the norm. I think that it's probably a little harder than what I did, but.
Kacey, I've done 5 or 6 Honorverse anthologies.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that it depends hugely on who you pick as the writers.
Sure.
Now, I have a little bit different situation from what you've got where the Honorverse is concerned, because I have to be sure that we maintain continuity across all these different platforms.
Right. So that requires more work on your end, sure.
Well, actually, yes and no. I give them the tech Bible, and then I tell them go write the story, and I try to limit my editorial input to the areas where continuity has to be adjusted to be maintained.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I'll tell you the hardest thing for any editor, and this is true whether you're editing short stories in an anthology or an entire manuscript, the hardest thing for an editor to do is to tell the writer that they see a problem without telling the writer how to fix it.
Yeah.
To say, here's the problem that I see, you have to fix it in your voice and your style, instead of saying, here's the problem that I see and here's how I think you should fix it.
Sure.
Okay, and that's the hardest lesson for somebody to learn. Now, as far as I'm aware, you didn't say, but David, at any point on my story, which was fun. I mean, that was novel. But what can I say?
Your story, and at the risk of sounding like a kiss ass, your story was one of the ones that I had to start a couple times because I kept reading it instead of editing it. so well, true confessions.
Yeah.
I'm really curious from David's end, because his story recruiting exercise is obviously based in the Honor Harrington universe. So I'm curious, knowing how long your novels are typically, how hard is it to stay within a word count for a short story anthology here?
Well, it depends. My idea of a short story is a little longer than most people's idea of a short story. My idea of a short story is 6,000 to 12,000 words. Okay, I mean, that's the target that I usually kind of shoot for. In this case, I told Kacey, I said, I can give you a science fiction or I can give you a fantasy, because I've got the heck, I could have given her one from Safehold for that matter, because I've got Ninian Richter there. I've got a bunch of dangerous people, female types running around in Norfresa, and then I've got the Honorverse. And she said that she thought that they were going to be a little heavily tilted towards the fantasy anyway, so that she wanted science fiction. And that particular story was part of the background of the character that I'd always wanted / needed to expand upon. Okay, it's actually, recruiting exercise actually builds off of Our Sacred Honor that appeared in Brian Schmidt's anthology Infinite Stars. And this follows off of it, filling in part of the background for Eloise Pritchard, although she's not the viewpoint character in the story. So I had a very clear idea of what I wanted to do in the story before I started, and that helped. And I actually, even though I practically never write it, I really like writing first person, which is sort of a noir hallmark.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this was very comfortable for me in that respect. I don't usually get to be like a 19-year-old girl while I'm doing first person. That was different, But,
Say it isn't so, David.
Yeah, what can I say?
Well, that's like every Tuesday night at my house.
There are some things we don't talk about. But story length is tied into concept length and into character count. And my problem is that I like to populate stories with lots of characters. Yeah. To me, the characters are what it's all about. Okay. And in short stories, you frequently can't do that. In short stories, it has to be about the action, or it has to be about only 1 or 2 characters that you're really looking at intensively. And I managed to do that in recruiting exercise with the internal viewpoint, while giving you, with Eloise and Kevin, some of that external for those who know the series. You see what I'm
Right.
saying? So I was able to bring those characters into the story and do character development with them, because this is an intermediate stage between Sacred Honor and when we meet Eloise in the books. But I didn't have to do it from the ground up.
Right.
And it works for those who didn't know who Eloise and Kevin were as well, I think. But for those who are Honorverse readers, there's a whole extra level in here.
And I think that's cool to do. We talked about, I can't remember when we talked about short stories the last time, but we were talking about different things that you could do with short stories, and the way that the medium kind of lends itself to do different cool things that you can't do in novels, where like in short stories, if you end a short story on a question, then that's okay for a short story. You can't really do that on a novel. The novel has to answer the question.
Sure you can.
Well, I mean, you can, but you're going to have a lot of angry people.
It's called cliffhanger. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things I like about anthologies is seeing those different takes on it. And then as a reader, like you said, if you're in the Honorverse already and you're reading it and you get some of that extra stuff, but you don't miss any of it if you're not an Honorverse reader.
Yeah.
One of the wisest things an editor once said to me is, when you're looking at editing a manuscript and you take something out, remember, you knew it was there before you took it out. The reader doesn't know that. So you're looking at where the final manuscript is, rather than, but I really wanted to deal with that idea and now I'm not. You can do it another time, you can do it another place, but the reader is not going to miss the idea or the character that the reader never knew was there.
Right.
Well, and one of the things that I think, one of the other ways in which I was really blessed as an editor on this particular project is, so initially the concept that Larry and I presented to Tony Weisskopf was just noir stories, right? Noir science fiction, noir fantasy, to include urban fantasy, light horror, but everything with a noir slant to it. Tony, in her wisdom, and that sounds sarcastic, but it absolutely is not. Tony Weisskopf absolutely knows. She absolutely knows what she's doing. She said, this is good, I like this, but it needs to be more focused. We need to drill it down and give it more of a, rather than being noir all over the place, we need some facet that we want you to focus on. And so Larry and I brainstormed about that for a little while, about a week, and came up with the idea of focusing in on the character archetype of the femme fatale. And so one of the aspects that I enjoyed so much about reading and editing all of these stories is all of the different takes on the femme fatale that we had. Because the truth is, David's story, for example, has two characters that could potentially fit into that archetype: the viewpoint character and the object character, the character of Eloise Pritchard. And speaking, kind of going back to this idea that there's something extra there for Honorverse fans. I mean, that's absolutely something that we want to use to draw them in, because there's a lot of them and they tend to pay money for books. So into. But
I can see why you and Larry hit it off. I
have no problem with this.
Yeah, well, I'm an avowed capitalist as well. So, but it is very cool. I think, I mean, I've been a member of fandom all my life, various different fandoms and stuff. And it is very cool, I think, to have, a work that you read and you get part of it, and you understand that the reason you get part of it is because you're such a fan. And so that was one of the reasons why I was so excited that David brought us an Honorverse story, that Laurel K. Hamilton brought us a story from her Anita Blake series, which is her largest series, and is kind of a landmark series in the world of paranormal romance or urban fantasy. Yeah. So, and then Larry's Grimoire series, it too has callbacks to, or Grimoire story has callbacks to his original Grimoire series.
Kacey, one of the things that I liked about the concept of the anthology when you first talked to me about it, because I wasn't at that point, I didn't have any idea which of the various literary universes I would be working in, or whether you wanted me to do something entirely new, different outside. But, and this goes back to Tony's, we need to drill down more. We need to drill down.
Right.
In an anthology like this, that there's a shared thread in all the stories.
Yep.
And that means that you're getting different writers' takes on that thread. It's much more textured than an anthology where you're just shooting for stories.
Right.
In this case, you're shooting for stories that have a common focus,
right.
even though they may seem to be going off in all directions. And it gives you an opportunity, number one, to see how other writers that you may not have been familiar with deal with this. But number two, I think it gives you kind of a look at how the field in general, or our part of it, is dealing with it.
Absolutely.
If
absolutely.
you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other thing that I think people are really going to respond to, with this anthology, is that you genuinely do. You have 13 different takes on what exactly is this creature called the femme fatale. Chris Smith and Michael Ferguson wrote the lead-off story, and we made the decision to make that the lead-off story simply because of the way in which it perfectly sets the tone for the rest of the anthology, because it really does hit those noir notes just dead on. And so
by design, not by accident. I'll just
right. And
always good. Always good. If it's by design, it's replicatable. That's good.
That's right. That's right. And so the femme fatale that we get to meet in Ain't No Sunshine is she's surprising, but she's surprising in a way that when you see it, you're like, oh, I love that. That fits. That's part of this grittiness that I'm sort of trying to establish. And it's, I don't know. You want to talk about your story at all, or do you want me to just keep battling about it?
No, I can. I'm sorry. I just had something try to bite me. I think
that's what you get for sitting on the porch. I
know.
That would be a first on Keystroke. We have never had a guest bitten before on Keystroke.
I'm about to get the bug gasser and hit the mosquitoes because they decided to come out in force now. It's welcome to warm spring-ish Texas. But sorry. Anyway, going back. So Kacey and I had kicked this idea around with Kacey when she was still kind of in the preliminary planning stage. She goes, okay, so you're going to do this. I said, yeah, I know I'm going to do it because you're going to make me. And
you don't call me your aggressive muse for nothing.
No, I don't. No,
I like that aggressive muse. I've never heard of that.
Most muses don't come equipped with 9mm. That's all I'm going to say.
The good ones do.
Sorry, waist gunners and attack helicopters.
That is true.
There's been times where I was like, I feel like riding tonight, and I hear chopper or helicopter blades. Sorry, Kacey, helicopter in the background somewhere around because I live
in the chopper.
And it's like, yeah, maybe I should write something tonight just in case that's Kacey. So as we're kicking this idea around, she goes, okay, so what you going to write for me? I said, well, originally I was going to write kind of a follow-up / sequel to her 1940s LA story, but from the one of the other characters' point of view, and where hers was more of a noir story, mine was going to be kind of the hardball detective story. And I still want to do that at some point, but I don't know if I can now because we don't have the original story to play with, but it's possible. It's just, okay, well, since we're doing this, we're thinking about doing this kind of in a science fiction setting. What would you like to do? It's like, well, maybe we have that kind of character, but he doesn't like technology and is required to solve the mystery without using technology, where everybody else has, keypads and brain implants and whatnot. He's just like, nope, we're doing this the old-fashioned way. I'm going to take fingerprints. I'm going to, hit the streets with the magnifying glass and see what I can see. That was kind of the original idea. She liked it. I think I actually brought it up at that panel with Larry, and Larry was pretty excited about it too. And I said, okay, well, that kind of seals it. I'm going to write that one. And I started kind of building this character. Well, he doesn't like the tech, but what if the tech is the problem? And so his advantage is that he doesn't have the tech that is actually killing people. And he has to figure out how it's doing it, why it's doing it, and who is doing it. I get it probably about halfway through the story. I've got a decent skeleton kind of outline for it, and I go have drinks with my buddy Michael Ferguson, who, to give a quick brief bio on Michael and I met because he was the head brewer for BJ's Brewhouse, the national chain.
That works.
I work with BJ's Brewhouse.
Yeah.
I do, system installs and stuff like that. So I met Michael about 10 years ago, and we've become friends. He comes into town. We're sitting there, we're having a couple of beers, and we're chatting, and he's asking me how the writing is going. I say, great, here's what I got going on. And he says, oh, did I ever tell you I wrote a story that was accepted to Ellery Queen magazine? And it was one of these. One second, Michael. Kacey, I'm bringing in a co-author. That was it.
Yeah.
So I asked her before I asked him. She goes, okay, just remember, yeah, split all that, blah, blah, blah. But this is going to rock because here's why, here's his CV. She goes, oh, yeah, okay, definitely. Well, if you've ever met Michael's about 6'5". His nickname is Mufasa, and he sounds like Earl Jones. About 60 years old, large black man with a large presence. And so he and I started talking about it. I said, well, what do you think if the protagonist is black? And he goes, I love Walter Mosley. Let's make him an Easy Rollins kind of character. I said, perfect. Because while we have the hard-boiled tough guy persona with, Sam Spade and I'm trying to remember Chandler's and Dashiell Hammett's main guys, the Continental Op and stuff like that, Easy Rollins always kind of had this style to him.
Yeah.
The way he spoke, the way he handled things. If you ever read Devil in a Blue Dress, it's like urban 1940s urban poetry.
Yeah, he's like he was kind of the definitively smooth, He's had that.
He's like the Harlem Renaissance in character.
Billy D. Williams,
Yeah, he was Shaft before Shaft was Shaft.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He got the girls, he solved the mystery, he got the money, he got out clean, more or less. And so we really started building our character around Easy Rollins, and it really worked with the character because it gave him a point of contact, I guess, with the whole noir category. He likes that aesthetic, so that's why he does it, even though he's 200-300 years in the future, and he gets hell about it from his friends. Like, you're dressing in a fedora and a wife beater t-shirt and suspenders. Why? Because it's cool, man. It's just like that worked into really well to kind of segue into this with our theme, though. When we sat down and kicked it around, it's like, well, we want to have a contrast between old and new. So we have a guy who dresses like an old school 1940s gumshoe, who speaks like a 1940s gumshoe, who's living in the year 2200, 2300. He's on a space station that is the oldest in the fleet. So it's falling apart, but they're trying to keep it up. So they have new paint over things. And one of the lines that we have in there is how the paint's peeling away and you can see the rot and the corrosion underneath it. And it just kind of, we kept with that theme the entire time when it came to old versus new, new tech, old style detective methods,
Right.
new relationship with someone he knew in the past.
Yeah. And you guys, doing that made you guys, I think, it informed the aesthetics of your story to the point where you were, I think that's why you guys were able to hit all of those beats so perfectly. That's the reason why we chose your story to be the first one, because it does set the mood for the entire anthology.
Well,
because
it also sounds to me like one of the strengths of this story is that you were sounding board off of each other, that the synergistic effect of the two viewpoints probably helped hit all the bases in the I hate to use this word because it gets so overly used, but in the tropes of noir. It's one of the joys of collaboration when it works,
right,
is that you're filling in the holes and that there's that resonance effect. that helps to drive it along. It sounds like you guys had a really good partnership on this.
Michael and I had a great time.
Should we assume there are more in the offing, perhaps?
Mike Mufasa tells me
there will be. There will be.
He's
okay.
So outlining at least 2 or 3 more Isaac Slade stories.
Yeah.
So he's extremely excited about it.
And what a great name, right? Isaac Slade. Like, how is that not a noir detective?
Like, okay, what do we name this guy? Okay, we name him this, and then we name him this. We're like, no. It's like, all right, well, we need a nice tough guy name. It's like, Sam Spade. How about Slade? All right, but what rolls up? Isaac Slade. Just almost at the exact same time. Isaac Slade. Yes, that's right. To make it even better, we had gone down to there's a place in downtown San Antonio called the Bar 1919, which is literally based on an old speakeasy style. You go down the stairs into the basement. It's got, comfy couches and books and all this, and just great, fantastic selection of stuff. All the bartenders are in suits. And we're sitting there putting the story together in the corner, just kind of soaking in this atmosphere. And because it has such a low ceiling, it's, I think, maybe a 7-foot tall ceiling. So it's right over Michael's head.
Yeah.
It gave him that space station kind of claustrophobia feel when we walked in. He's like, this is perfect. Why didn't we come here the very first time we talked? We had been drinking and we couldn't drive down here. So therefore,
some of the best stories are great.
And Ubered home.
Really
Michael
quick,
and I had a great time writing it.
I want to touch on kind of the writing aspect a little bit more, because I'm curious on the collaborative short story effort, just because Kacey and I just did it, so I'm interested about that, especially anthology wise. But I want to touch on our show sponsor real quick before we move into that. And for the last time this year, the show sponsor will be Covers for a Cure. The event is done, but the donations are still open. So if you are able to donate and you wanted to take part in the event but couldn't, you can send your donations through our website, keystrokemedium.com. On the right-hand side of the page, you'll see the donate button. We will have donation. We all have the ability to donate through tomorrow. And then after that, I'll have to shut it down so we can give the nonprofit our number and we can say, here it is. However, you can continue to donate after that if you would like, to Matt Young and his family through the Honor Adversus Foundation. Matt Young is an officer on the police department here in Wichita, who was detective who was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And he is... not have long to live. And so his family, he has a wife, 7 children, and at least 1 grandchild. And so we thought this year that we would do our event for him and his family.
5 of those kids are adopted from rather difficult situations. And he's one of those, there's one of those families where they'd come to him and say, well, we don't want to break up these kids. Will you take all of them? And they're like, sure, we'll adopt them all.
Right.
Wow.
Two or three at a time. So very generous person.
Yeah, no kidding.
So our event on Saturday was extremely successful. We auctioned off 8 covers from Tom Edwards, Jamie Glover, and Kevin McLaughlin. And through those covers and the donations that people have made, we are now at $4,679. And so, like I said, donations will be open through us till tomorrow, and then through Honor Adversus indefinitely.
Okay, Josh, I was not aware of what you're doing here until tonight. And I know you said you can only take donations through tomorrow. However, if you want to add to your list here in the time that you've got left, I will throw a first readership into the pot to be auctioned off. And that will mean that whoever bids for it will get every David Weber manuscript and every collaborative David Weber manuscript at the same time they go to the publisher.
Holy crap.
So, if you can put that in, I don't know how thoroughly you can publicize it in the time you've got left. But anybody listening to this, Josh, if you'll,
we'll definitely talk about it after, because I think that's something that we can do.
Yeah, if you'll write herd on it, just get us an email address for whoever wins.
Yeah.
Then I'll do that part from this end. You take care of the money from your end.
Awesome. Thank you very much, sir. I
All right.
appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
That's what I love about this show. We do great things, and thank you, David, very much for that. That is awesome. I'll take care of that. We'll get started on that in the next couple of days. So, yeah, that's great. So let's move on with the show a little bit. And we were talking a little bit about Christopher's story and collaborating with Michael. Kacey and I it's funny that you mentioned just going up to the wire and Kacey sending you a story in a couple of days that was just complete. That's kind of what happened with ours. We had like 2 months to write it, and then just smashed it out in like 72 hours, and we wrote our stories.
I think
it's due day after tomorrow. Oh,
that's like, whoops.
Yeah, kind of a little bit. Well, the full story on this one is that the anthology that we wrote these 2 stories for is being edited by a friend of mine by the name of Jamie Ibsen, and it's called We Dare, and it'll be coming out from Chris Kennedy Publishing late in May, which means that he had to have the stories in, this week. So the original deadline for it was April 15th, I think. And Jamie had originally asked me to do this, if I could do a story. And I had told him, because I had promised Chris Kennedy that I would not take on any more projects until I turned in my novel that I just turned in. Because he wanted me to focus on that and get it in. So I was like, all right, I won't do any more shorts until that's done. And then Jamie asked me to do this, and I was like, oh man, I want to, but I promised Chris. And Jamie was very understanding. He's like, no, I get it. You're very busy. It's cool. Let me know if something changes. Well, at the beginning of like February, it was looking good, and I was going to have it done by the end of March. And so I was like, hey, I think I can maybe I can still do this. If you're interested, are you interested? And he was like, yeah, of course, I'd love to. And I was like, great. And I'm thinking, like, I had forgotten the timeline on it, and I'm thinking the deadline's like June. And I was like, and I have this great idea, and I want to bring in this friend of mine named Josh Hayes. He's a well-known indie sci-fi author, and I think it's going to be really cool. And Jamie was all for it. And I was like, and so you need these like in June, right? And he was like, no, I need them 15 April. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, you and the IRS both. Okay.
Mike went back to Josh and was like, hey, Josh, I'm sorry, but I kind of promised that you would do this by 15 April. And Josh was like, oh,
right.
Okay.
April is the new June.
Right. So, yeah. So it was all my fault is really what it came down to. Yeah.
That's right. That's what happened. We were up till like 11 o'clock the night that we had to have the story turned in, and we were still going back and forth.
Yeah.
Eric Flint made a fascinating point to me some years ago that I think was probably not an insight that's unique to him. But he said, used to be that when people did collaborations, they had to live in the same house.
Right.
Or at least the same block, because you had to be able to push the manuscript back and forth to have face-to-face sessions. Well, in the last 20 years, that's totally changed, with the ability to zap files back and forth, to use review comments and the whole 9 yards. Collaboration just became something that you could do, not just transcontinental. You can do it, with somebody in Germany.
And if you need to talk to your co-author, it's as simple as, hey man, can you hop on video chat for a minute? I need to go over this with you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, now that doesn't do too much about the traditional stumbling blocks for collaborations, like real life getting in the way. When your co-author face plants into a cement floor the day the Dragon Con begins, it could be a little bit of a bummer for the folks you're working with. I have to say, I'm still recovering from the concussion.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't right before author photos.
Yeah, well. But I mean, seriously, in October when I was traveling, doing the signing tour for Uncompromising Honor, I was realizing, boy, I'm a lot clearer than I was a month and a half ago. And then, like November rolls around, and like, boy, I'm a lot clearer than I was in October. And now I'm back up to about 7,500 words a day on a good day. And I'm like, man, I haven't been able to do this for like 6 months.
Yeah.
It really was a sobering experience for me in that respect. And it's been a real pain for several people who are working on projects with me right now. They've all been kind enough not to say, yo, David, kind of thing. But if I'd been them, I'd have been saying it. I mean, but they're nicer than I am, so they don't,
Yeah.
So Chris, I'm curious about your collaboration. You said you some of it was born in a bar, and then you kind of went back and forth with it. But
90% of it was born in the bar.
Yeah,
the best things are.
10% was in the coffee shop because we wanted to get the work actually done.
Who was it that said write drunk and then edit sober? Who said
Hemingway.
Hemingway. Yeah.
He also ate a shotgun, so let's not follow all.
That's right.
Yeah,
exactly.
He's pretty sure
take that advice.
I'm pretty sure he edited drunk too.
Yeah. So I'm curious that
I've tried it both ways.
The stories that Kacey and I worked on were two whole stories that mirrored each other, and and obviously you guys wrote one. So how did you guys go through did you draft the first draft and he went back and wrote into, or how did you guys come up with the way you collaborated with that?
I don't think I've ever had actually the ability to do that. Normally when I collaborate with someone, especially with Michael, we just kind of developed ideas at the same time. He'd jot it down. I'd look at it and say, okay, I think this, and then this, and I'd jot something down, and then we'd just go back and forth like that. There was some where it was whole scenes. So I had kind of the introductory scene where we meet Slade and his partner, kind of setting up some details with who Denny is and what we're looking at as life on the spaceship. Michael had come back in and wrote the introductory scene for Isaac, the opening scene, where he had taken the idea of, okay, here's this guy that doesn't like technology. Let's put him in his room. What's his room going to have? And he described the room and kind of got some good internal dialogue going on with Isaac. Some of it was literally both of us hammering on the keyboard at the exact same time for the exact same scene. It was oddly organic. We never seemed to step on each other's toes, and we seemed to take the idea that someone had, they would write it, they get kind of stuck, stop, and the other person would pick up every once in a while. And Kacey and I have done this as well. But yeah, it was kind of a combination of everything. We ended up having a first draft that I went back over and said, okay, I think this needs to tweak here, and I think we change a little language here. And then I sent it back to him, and he said, okay, I think we need to add this, and he'd add it. And then we just kind of whipped it back and forth a couple of times until we were happy with it. And then we sent it off to Kacey, and then she said she was happy with it, and then we were happy.
Everybody was happy.
Everybody was really happy. And then apparently Larry was walking around humming Ain't No Sunshine after he read it. So I took that as a huge compliment.
100%.
Well,
100%.
Every collaboration, every collaborative relationship is different. Okay.
Yeah.
And
I would argue, David, that every project, even with the same collaborative pair, is going to be different.
That's true.
Even if it's just slightly
absolutely
in the process. Yeah.
I would say that I would agree with you 100% unless you're talking about a series collaboration, because in a series collaboration, the collaborative mechanism,
sure,
it's going to grow and evolve because you're going to grow and evolve in the relationship. I don't care if you've been writing for 3 years or 30 years. Right. I've never done a collaboration that I didn't learn something from, even if it was, well, I'm not going to do that again, kind of thing. Which is valuable. It's valuable,
I was really glad Kacey didn't come away with that from my experience. Like, oh, well, really glad I'm not doing that. Yeah. Well, that's what she says.
That doesn't usually happen in
I've learned who not to write with ever again. Okay.
Yeah. That could be a part of it, but
for the record, I haven't had that yet. Just saying.
Yes, but I think that in any collaborative relationship, there has to be an understanding of who's going to do the final edit. But I think that
who has final veto power.
Yeah, well, final veto power maybe. I think that the partner who doesn't have the final edit has to have the right to veto final edit if it's dealing specifically with his or her characters or a specific situation. They have to be able to say, but what you're doing is taking away from this part of it. And then the person who is the senior editor, the final editor, has to be willing to listen. Okay. But you were talking about when you were kind of brainstorming. I just finished this. Well, I didn't just finish. The collaboration's coming out in May with Jacob Holo, the Gordian Protocol. Jacob is an engineer with BMW, the kind of guy who runs $1 million projects, $4 million projects, kind of thing. And I'm a historian. And our strengths, I'm also 27 years older than him, but we won't mention that. I'm 27 years older than everybody now.
We'll edit that part out.
Yeah, thank you. But the thing is that our brainstorming sessions meshed perfectly. He sat here in the office with me on the sequel to the Gordian Protocol, and we were just, we knew exactly what we were going to do. And we sat down to discuss a few final details, and 3 hours later, we had taken the entire original plot concept apart and put it back together into something much stronger, because we were both having kind of ooh shiny moments off of something the other one was saying. And that is what it sounds to me like you were having with Michael. And that's gold. Okay. That's the kind of collaborative relationship that clicks and that sustains itself. Okay. Because first of all, you're having fun. And that's a huge part of it. I mean, I think your readers can tell whether or not you had fun writing the story, even if it's and they all died in the end. It's like, one normally assumes that they all died in the end. Yeah, it's like, but there are collaborative partnerships where the magic is there, and there are collaborative partnerships where the magic isn't there. But if both writers are professionals, you can make either of them work. Right. It's just that one is an experience that kind of enhances the creative spirit, and the other one is one where you're kind of bashing through to get to the final product. In every book I've ever written, there's the chapter. The chapter is the point at which I'm saying, this is dreck. It's the worst thing I ever I've ever written. It'll never work. I got to get through, et cetera, et cetera. Then I do the final edit, and I can't remember which chapter it was. Okay, but it's just you hit that point, or I do.
Oh yeah.
In every project, and part of succeeding at this is not listening to the voice in your head that's saying this will never work, because it happens. Now I will admit that I was working. I was working on a series, a book for Jim Bain, a prequel series to the Path of the Fury universe, with the creation of the Terran Empire and the House of Murphy and everything. And I was like 80,000 words into the book when I realized I hadn't made the technology 300 years cruder. And the way the action was working out all depended on the technology, so I had to start over again. And I was fighting it. I mean, I was beating my head against it. I was doing well to get 1,200 words a day. And Jim called me and asked me how I was doing. And I was like, Jim, it's, and he said, why don't you write something else? I said, because I got a deadline on this one. He said, and who's that deadline with? And I said, you. And he said, well, then if I tell you to go write something else, it's okay. So I did, and the contract got converted to something else. But that happens in collaborative relationships, and sometimes the collaborator just has to say to his partner, okay, I can tell that you're really fighting this. If you need to do something else, tell me. Okay, if it's something else we can do together for this story, then we're good on that. If it's just you need to do something else, you need to be somewhere else, we could do that too. You know what I'm saying? You have to respect your partner enough to acknowledge that he's your partner, which means that you can't constrain him to be somebody he's not, just because that's the story that you two set out to write.
Right.
One of the things that I thought was interesting about working with Kacey on this last story was that we spent probably an hour and a half on Skype, the first planning session we had, and we worked out. I had a yellow notebook and I'm furiously writing down all these ideas, and I'm pretty sure she was doing her daughter's hair for the prom or something while we were working on
Kacey
it.
can multitask like nobody else.
Oh, like no other. And I'm,
I think it comes with her day job, honestly, when you have to have 6 or 7 different things going on at the exact same time.
Right. And
she was also flying when you did that.
That's right.
Well,
I was so loud. The Skype was impossible.
That's right. So we planned out for like an hour and a half. We planned out the way we thought our story would go, and we had all these ideas. And we both went and wrote a scene. And I loved her scene. She liked mine, and we kind of went back and forth. By the second planning session, we had thrown out 75% of what we did in the first writing session on both ends.
Yeah.
And we were like, I think this would work better. And I was like, yes. And I think this would work better. And we were changing things all the way up until the last day, where we were just sitting there going back and forth on Messenger going, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And it was really kind of a neat back and forth, because neither one of us were really like, no, that can't happen. We were both very open to kind of a fluid nature of the way the draft was going to work. And I liked that a lot.
Should I tell
you? Sorry, go ahead, David.
Should I tell you a secret, Josh?
Yes.
The story's never done.
That is true.
Okay. I mean, there's just a point at which you have to say, okay, it's not done, but I'm going to have to stop. Okay,
right.
I can't keep tweaking unless I'm Patricia McKillip. Okay, who does these? I mean, okay, Patricia McKillip is one of my favorite writers. Okay, because she's one of those people where every single word is part of this faceted mosaic that she's put together. I think the Riddlemaster trilogy is, I think it's, if not the finest, one of the finest, one of the half dozen finest fantasy trilogies out there. And they're short books. But man, are they good. And I'm a storyteller who has to let the story go to let the next one in the queue out.
Right.
Okay. So I can't, if I tried to polish the way that she does, my brain would explode. Okay, and I would never, ever, ever, ever turn a story loose, because every single time you go back to the manuscript, you see a place that you can make it better.
Yeah. One of the things that we're sort of dancing around here that I kind of want to highlight too is, I think in any creative process, but certainly in a creative process that involves another person, whether that be a collaborator, not like wartime, you know what I mean, like a co-author.
Are you making a comment about my shaved head, Kacey? I'm just wondering here.
I just finished writing like post-war Berlin, so that was on my mind. But anyway, whether that person is like a co-author or co-creator, or even to bring it back to the topic of the anthology, even an editor, it's a relationship, and like any relationship, you absolutely 100% positively have to have open lines of communication. Otherwise it's not going to work. Right. So, Chris and I wrote the first book in a trilogy with John Ringo, and Chris and I did the initial draft and then sent it to John for his inputs, the whole junior author, senior author sort of dynamic that Bain sets up. And we found it was really interesting, because we found that we worked best when we had pretty much daily conversation sessions, either through Messenger or sometimes through video chat. But we would get together and we would talk about what we were doing, and we weren't even necessarily working on the same scenes or even the same chapters, because I tend to have to write pretty chronologically, and Chris is one of those very talented individuals who thinks episodically, so he can say, okay, I want to jump forward and write this piece of the end game of the the story, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to, you know, write this intro so that it flows in. And so
it's ADHD, man.
Yeah, I was just gonna say there's a diagnosis for that
there, Kacey. It's just I can't focus on squirrel.
You know? So whatever. The point is, in order for that to work, we had to talk daily. And it was so funny because I can remember telling you after we finally, you know, finished the draft and sent it off to John for his initial inputs, I can, you know, and then like I didn't talk to you for like a day or so. And I can remember thinking, God, I miss him. Like, where's my buddy that I talk to, you know? And even with Josh, I mean, you know, the other day we turned in those stories, last Wednesday, I think it was. Yep. And on Thursday, I was like, I need to talk to Josh some more. So Josh and I had this whole conversation while I was driving home from work about, hey, in the future, maybe should we do something with these guys?
Yeah.
You know?
No, I thought we had a longer conversation after we turned the stories in than we did when we were actually writing the stories.
Right. But that was another piece of working on this on Noir Fatale that was really great, and I was again very, very blessed to be able to work with the talented individuals that I was able to work with, and all of them communicated beautifully with me as the editor about what they needed and what they wanted, and responded to my communications back. And at no point did I feel like, at no point, even, you know, and I apologize if this is embarrassing to you, David, but even when editing David and when editing Laurel Hamilton, you know, two individuals that I've been fans of for years, before I even started writing, I was fans of their work. At no point did I feel like I couldn't make editorial comments and have those be received properly, because you know, David's a professional and Laurel's a professional and Larry's a professional. And if I'm acting as their editor and I give them an editorial comment and say, I think that this piece needs to be addressed because of X, Y, and Z, I know that their interaction with me was such that I knew that they would come back and they may not necessarily agree with me. They may argue for it, which is absolutely their right as the creator. But they wouldn't discount me, which was great, you know, so.
Well, Kacey, there are two factors going on here that I don't think you've specifically mentioned here. One is you talked about selecting the authors to invite. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, you invited a group who are professionals.
Sure.
Okay. So you pre-selected. Yeah. Okay. And then there's him. Okay. but
wait a minute. That's usually me.
I knew this was going to happen if I brought Chris on your show, Josh. You guys are going to have like this like bromance.
I like this guy.
but
wait till you get to know me.
Yeah. You kind of pre-selected for people who would have that response. And the other side of it was that you approached it as a professional.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And writers are like anybody else. We tend to respond to people the way that they respond to us.
Sure.
Okay. If there's an open communicative relationship with an editor, then we're good.
Right.
Okay. There are a few of us who aren't. There are a few of us who are pains in the excretory orifice. I will not pretend that I know any people like that. You understand?
No one you've ever worked with.
Nobody I ever worked with. But you know, it's you. I don't know. It's
well, sure, and thank you for saying that too, because that informed a little bit of my planning and such too. Because you know, by the time I was starting to put this anthology together, I had participated in, I think, 2 or 3 Baen anthologies and like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 for Chris Kennedy. And I had seen various different styles of editors' communications with their group of authors for a project. And so I had seen some things that I liked and some things that I didn't like as much. And so I sort of approached it, honestly, I kind of approached it kind of like I do, you know, these special projects that you get as a military officer from time to time, like, hey, go plan this change of command. It's like, all right, well, this is how I'm going to do this. I'm going to send out an email and say, okay, you're all my team for this change of command, and here's when I'm going to expect you to report into me, and stuff like that. So.
Well, what you're going to have to look out for, Kacey, is that good anthology editors tend to wind up doing a lot of anthologies that tend to start cutting into their solo production time.
Yeah.
Because it takes a special gift to put an anthology together. Okay. It takes a gift to find the theme. It takes a gift to find the writers, and then it takes a gift to keep all the balls in the air until you get it done. And from where I sit, looking at how this one went together, you did pretty good in all those categories.
Oh, yeah.
So this is
it's about as smooth as an experience as I've had writing with any anthology at this point.
Anthologies are not novels.
Right.
Okay, they're not even novellas. They're heterogeneous, and it's up to the editor to give a sense of homogeneity to it, even though they're heterogeneous. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, and I think you did that.
Thank you.
And I'm very happy with the final product.
Thanks. Me too.
Yeah,
I'm so excited for people to read it.
Oh yeah.
And it comes out in another week or so, May 7th.
Yes, May 7th. Mm-hmm.
May 7th.
It will be competing with my collaboration. Buy both.
Well, that's just
in case you didn't know.
Yeah, that's true.
I did find out that if you go to Barnes & Noble and you order yourself a copy, that they will call you when it comes in, which means that you don't have to buy it, but you can sign all the other ones before they hit the shelf. So
nice.
I did a little recon on that one the other day. Just kind of, hey, here's this anthology coming out on May 7th. When would you guys get it? They're like, oh, well, we'll Tuesday, so we'll probably have it Thursday or Friday. Why don't you order a copy, and then we'll call you when it comes in, and then we'll just hand you all the rest of them to sign.
Nice.
Perfect.
Nice.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, a little guerrilla signing mission. I love it.
A little.
Josh, sorry. I know.
Yes.
Josh,
Call me Clyde. It's cool.
Do you guys mind if I talk for a minute about some of the other stories of the writers who are not here tonight?
Absolutely, I don't mind. Do your thing.
Okay. So let's see. As I mentioned before, Laurel K. Hamilton has an original Anita Blake story that's called Sweet Seduction, and it is classic Anita Blake. And by that I mean that there's a lot of ass kicking in it. There's a lot of snarky, sarcastic comments, especially before Anita has her coffee. There's a lot of, but there's also a lot of, there's a very sexy undercurrent to it, but it's also surprising in a way that works very well with our noir aesthetic. And it's very, like David mentioned earlier, one of the most fun parts of this process for me was reading each of these stories and seeing how each author interpreted those noir tropes and those noir beats, because they all did, and they all did it very differently. And it was very, very cool. So that's Sweet Seduction by Laurel K. Hamilton. You know what? I'm going to have to go in order. So the first story was Kristen and Michael's Ain't No Sunshine. The second one was David's story, Recruiting Exercise. The third one's actually mine, which I mentioned but didn't really talk about. Mine is I originally wrote it post World War II, and then when we, started putting this anthology together, I put a sci-fi spin on it and moved it forward a couple hundred years. So it's now still set in Washington, D.C. and Alexandria, but it's after a global war, World War III or IV, take your pick.
Real quick, can I jump in? Because I got to read it before everybody else did. It has a real kind of Blade Runner feel to it that I really liked. It was nice, that futuristic neon, raining, gritty look to everything. In my mind, it was perfect.
Thank you.
Carry on.
That's nice of you to say.
Oh, well, I get to toot your horn too.
Can I throw one thing in here before you go on?
Sure.
There's a distinct difference between noir and dystopian.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this is noir. Okay,
Right.
This is not a dystopian future or a dystopian anthology. I just wanted to get that out there because to me that's an important distinction.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we sort of allude to it a little bit in the promo copy for the anthology, because we talk about how there's like a little note of hope in there as well, which sounds weird when you're talking about noir, because it's, noir is dark. I mean, it literally means black, right? Okay, so It's dark and it's gritty, and we talk about it being the seamy underside of humanity. But then there's that piece where you have this guy, and this main character, and he's a good man, but he's not a good guy. He's not a safe guy. He does the right thing, even when it means he's not going to get the girl or maybe make the big score. But he does it because it's the right thing to do, even when it's a Pyrrhic victory, which it often is. And I think that's sort of the essential difference between noir and grimdark, or noir and dystopia.
I think the distinction between noir and dystopia is that in noir, even when the hero loses, he wins.
Sure. Or even when he wins, he loses.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. It's there's a lot of that dark side, light side juxtaposition going on all the time there. So, okay.
He solved the case, but the bad guy got away.
Right. Right. Or,
but maybe not. So,
Bogart saves the woman he loves, but she ends up running off with her husband anyway, so
correct.
Same kind of thing. But yeah, back to stories. So that my story is called Spoils of War. Griffin Barber wrote an amazing fantasy story with a really, really cool femme fatale character called A Goddess in Red, where it's this is actually a lead-in story to a solo project he's working on that he's almost finished with. He's been almost finished with it for a while. So I've been gently nudging him to be like, come on, Griff, I need you to I need to read the end of her story.
3 years, Griff, come on.
Finish the story so we can all read it. So, but yeah, A Goddess in Red is probably one of my favorite female characters I've ever read. And I've read a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm going to break in again real quick. Can we nominate Griffin Barber to read the audiobook version of Noir Fatale? Because the man's voice makes me excited.
I think that's already been assigned, but yeah, I'd sign up for that.
That's what I tell Scott every morning when I call him.
Yeah.
Scott's got a lot of that same sort of like sexy DJ sort of
gravelly
vibe going. Yeah.
Screaming my road rage has affected my voice.
What happens when you yell at bad guys all day long?
True.
Sarah Hoyt has an amazing story called Honeyfall that gave me chills when I read it. And it's set in Colorado, which is, Sarah's from Colorado. And I really like these stories that are set in places that I know, because that's another sort of, not necessarily hallmark of noir, but it shows up in noir stories a lot, where, like in LA Confidential and Mulholland Falls, and the city, the location, the place is almost like another character, right? Because it feeds into the story so much. Honeyfall is it's got a lot of the same Chandler-esque sort of feel that really resonates with me. And I really, 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 really hope Sarah writes a novel set in this universe someday, because I'm going to read the crap out of that. Mike Massa, who's, another one of our little group of buddies that hang around together at cons and stuff. He wrote a story called The Three Kates that's set in World War II in England. And the main character for that one is a German agent who's he's like a German Indiana Jones, is what, how American-born German Indiana Jones is how Mike describes him. And he's going after some supernatural relics, and gets foiled by the classic femme fatale, and realizes that he doesn't know shit about what's going on around him. So Larry's story is called Bombshell. It's the anchor story in the anthology. It's the very last one, and it is set in his Grimoire series, but it is set 20-ish years after the last Grimoire novel. So the main character is the son of a couple of the primary characters in the Grimoire, the original Grimoire series. It's not Jake's kid, no.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's
that would be scary. Okay, I'm just telling you.
This character.
What can you do? Gravity. Oh.
He's a son of the two characters, and I can't think off the top of my head which they are, but he's a son of two Grimoire Knights, and his twin brother is a Grimoire Knight, but he was born without the ability to access magic, and so his whole shtick is that he's going to be a homicide detective, and he's going to do it without magic at all. And so they have a serial killer shows up in New York, a magical serial killer, and so he's under some suspicion, by other people in the department because of his family connections and stuff. And it's very, very good. Hinckley Correia, Larry's daughter, wrote this really great story called Kuro, and it is it's set in Japan, and the main character of this series is the son of a family of ghost hunters, Japanese ghost hunters. And so she worked in a lot of elements of Japanese mythology.
So you don't
she's sorry. She told a great story, and it was a really fun ride, and it was really fun for me to edit her and work with her on polishing that story. I didn't have much to do, honestly. She turned in a great product, like everyone did. But so it was really neat, and I'm really thrilled with how it came out. The Privileges of Violence is by Steve Diamond. Steve, this one is probably one of the darkest stories in the anthology. It's set in a alternate universe. Well, alternate universe is probably too strong, but it's like a World War I-esque trench fantasy type universe. And the main character is a secret policeman, a la Soviet Union. So very scary, very dark stuff, very cool. Worth the Scars of Dying is by Pat Tracy. And this one is poetic in its beauty, which I found out that Pat Tracy is actually an award-winning poet, so that totally fits. But the Worth the Scars of Dying is essentially what happens when your D&D campaign turns into a D&D film noir. The Frost Queen is by Robert Buettner, and this story surprised the hell out of me and made me tear up when I read it. Originally, I started reading it, and it's a sci-fi story set on the moon. The main character's adolescent kid, male kid, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, Bob, this is a gorgeous story, but where's the noir? Like, where is this? I don't get it. And then I got to the end, and he flipped it. And it's so beautiful, and it's so perfectly noir, and you don't even realize it until you read like the end of it, the last of it.
Oh, I love those kind of stories.
And it's breathtaking. Yeah. It really is. It might be my favorite story in the anthology. And then last,
is it the kind of one where you go back and read it again, and you're like, ah.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly what it was. And then String of Pearls is by Alastair Kimball. And I know if you've ever met Alastair Kimball at a convention or anything, he goes to LibertyCon sometimes. This guy is like, he belongs. He is like a hard-boiled detective, right? Like, he wears a fedora on the daily. He posts Instagram pictures of his scotch and cigars that he drinks. Like, it's just, he's always dressed to the nines. He's the archetype of the hard-boiled detective. And he wrote this gorgeous story called String of Pearls that's very, very, very immersive is the first word that comes to mind when I read it, because his language is so rich, and so it draws you in with that like murky, thick, darkness where you can hear the high heels walking down the street, and you can feel the mist that's shrouding the streetlights around you. And it's fantastic. So that's all of them. And thank you for letting me go on that really long description of all of the stories.
That's what this whole episode is for, Kacey.
So, I just wanted to make sure and give everyone equal time and sing the praises of all of these stories, because they're seriously some of my favorite stories that I've ever read, and I'm really, really privileged and honored that I had a part in putting this together.
Put your earphones in, Kacey.
Good.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, it's all right. The world just ended there for a second. It's fine
Do
now.
not attempt to adjust
We all
your
died.
set, you know.
It's fine.
Like,
Okay, so
It's
it
all
wasn't
fine.
just me.
yeah.
No,
No, it was all of us.
Okay.
Casey just
We'll edit that out.
killed the internet for about
well,
5 seconds.
what we're going to discover when we get done here is it wasn't just us; it was the entire planet.
That's
Okay,
right.
and there's this big ship settling into orbit. It's about a quarter the size of Earth. You know.
Cool.
I feel like
Indeed.
this has happened before. Noir Fatale comes out on the 7th of May, but is available for pre-order now. I'm going to put the link in the live chat. So if you're watching live right now, go and pre-order the book.
I just got mine.
It will be in the show notes from now until eternity when YouTube decides to cancel all our shows. So if you're watching this after the live show, please go and pick up a copy of Noir Fatale. And
I'm already going to get one. That's
no, David, you have to go and buy your own copy.
Oh wait, Casey, you didn't tell me.
I
This
told
is
you I
after
like
Casey
mine.
showed the big box of books that she got.
Yeah.
I'm all, yeah, all right, cool. I get mine soon. Every day, check the mail, no book.
Yeah.
Wah, wah.
Well, Chris and David and Casey, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. It's been a blast talking about these stories. Always love having you guys on.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us. It's
Yep.
it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
it's fun.
putting up with me again. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
what can I say?
Anytime you want, sir. Anytime you want.
Oh
I
yeah,
just
right.
take a moment and point out that I was very well behaved on this one. At no time did I make an inappropriate comment or drop an F-bomb. I feel like we should acknowledge that.
True.
I think we should probably take a
fix
moment and thank Sharon for allowing David to come on the show for a third time. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon.
Oh, Sharon is
Sharon.
like, oh darn, you're back. I mean, you know, it's kind of like, what can I say?
Everybody that hung out in the live chat with us tonight, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We had a couple new people, and of course, the shenanigans were going crazy. If you're listening on the podcast feed and you weren't aware that we had a live show, every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, we are live on Keystroke Medium right here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Keystroke Medium. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us anywhere. Just search Keystroke Medium because we're the only one around. We're the only one, literally. You type it in and we're right there. So thank you guys for a great show. And we will come back. Let's see. What do we got coming up this week? Let's see.
I just realized that I didn't have the chat window open, so I'm going to need everybody to repeat every comment so I can see them.
Actually, we weren't live that whole time, so hold on. Let me go ahead and click live, and we'll start all over. Just remember everything you said.
My bad.
And we'll work it out. We've got several good guests coming up this month. Oh, Kevin J. Anderson is going to be on the 20th of this month. That's going to be a fun show.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah. So lots of good things lighting up, and I'm looking at the calendar right now, and this month is completely booked solid for both the Writer's Journey and Keystroke Live. So May is going to be a really, really fun month. So if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so. If you haven't liked us on Facebook, go and do that. Come back next Monday. We're going to talk about everything about writing, about reading, and everything in between.
Oh my God.
I was fucked up our own intro.
Yeah.
You've only done that intro or outro
4 seasons, and I've never messed it up one time.
Okay, you know,
we're going
that's
to talk
kinda,
about a little bit about reading and writing and everything.
Okay, Josh, that's kind of like saying he's 2 outs away from a perfect game. I'm just telling you, okay?
Just screw it.
That's it. Yeah, that's
not good.
Oh my, let's try it again. All right.
He's never missed a field goal from this distance. Oh.
Laces out, Dan. All right. So we'll come back next week. We're going to talk about reading. We're going to talk about writing, and of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. You guys have a fantastic Monday. Thank you. Peace.
Night. Thanks for having me.
Good night.